welcome to Relish Books. Today I want to do something a little different. Somebody asked in a comment, I don't remember exactly how it went, but something like, what is my criteria for a good book or a great book? And there are so many. That's such a huge topic. I didn't really answer it because that's such a huge thing to put into a comment. But today I really want to talk about not so much necessarily what I'm always looking for in books, but because I've talked about that throughout all my videos. But why do we read classics? Why do we read any books, any novels? I'm talking about novels in particular. I'm talking about fiction. Why do we read books? Why do we read classics in particular? Old books? What makes them great? And there's so many answers and so many right answers. I'm sure there's a lot of things that are great reasons that I won't really talk about in this video, but I wanted to start. I'm going to be reading a couple quotes from this book by William Sloane, who was an editor for many years of many books, and it's called The Craft of Writing, and I highly recommend it for anybody who is interested in writing a book of any kind. It is kind of daunting. It's a very realistic, hard truths kind of book. So actually I got kind of discouraged when I read it, but there's so much truth and goodness and insight in it as well. And I want to read, to start out, I want to read this little passage. He says, "Good writing is always positive. It is always entertaining or useful or both. It is not a puzzle or a sermon or executed by a superior person for inferiors. What is written skillfully is apt to be good writing. Great writing and writers about greatness have assumed greatness in their readers. Shakespeare assumes the king and the magician and the coward and the hero in everyone. The skill and the desire to reach the reader are what carry the greatness, if it exists." And I think that is just so profound and so beautiful, because what I really want to address is this idea, this theme that I've kind of seen with some readers, some people in the comments. The video that I made on classics that I dislike, I made it kind of for the purpose of being controversial, because one of the beautiful things about books is that there's so many different things we can take from them personally, and we can have so many different opinions on them. And I might do more controversial videos in the future, because I found that negative comments are actually very entertaining. But anyway, I just wanted to talk about why I read classics, and what I'm looking for in them. That's something I didn't really go into in that video, but I do definitely have reasons and things that I'm looking for, and I particularly want to address this idea that I've talked about before about readers who are reading books for the purpose of being smart, particularly of sounding smart, and people who are reading books only as an intellectual exercise, who are looking at these great novels more like textbooks and more like a piece of work to be broken down and studied, and find all the metaphor in, and presume to say what the author was really meaning. I love what he says here about it's not something executed by a superior person for inferiors. What I want in a book, I've said this before, I never ever want to be talked down to. If a book is intellectual, if it's intelligent, if it's above me, I don't want the author talking like they're above me. I want them to assume that I can rise to their level. Not to say, I'm on this level, and if you're not on this level, you can't understand my work. But to assume or to talk down to you and to explain things to you because you're inferior. But to simply put their story forward and trust in the reader that that they can understand it. And that's what helps us grow as readers. But again, this idea to read to be smart, or to sound smart. I think reading to become smarter is very important, or maybe to put it better, reading to gain knowledge is very, very important, and it's a huge reason to read. It's a huge reason to read literature from any, kind of genre, not just novels, but that cannot be the only reason. If you're reading all these classics and all these great works just to be able to name drop all the time, just to be able to list the authors that you've read and to presume to understand what they were saying, you have completely missed the point of great literature. And that's something else I was thinking about, like talking about authors. And I want to read this other passage where he's talking about you as a writer. So when he says you, he's talking about you and the story you might be writing, and the relation of the writer to the reader. And he says, the next thing about your reader that's interesting is that he doesn't care all about you. If he's attending a class or a course, he has to care at least 9 sentences worth, which can be stated later in a term paper or an examination. But the genuine reader doesn't care whether he's reading a book written by a man or a woman, by somebody young or old, or if it was written yesterday or 200 years ago. Furthermore, he isn't there to be improved by you. He isn't saying, tell me, dear author, about yourself and what you think about the world, art, life, the eternal verities. What he is saying is so frightening that I urge you not to think about it while you are writing. You may get a kind of palsy. What he is saying is, tell me about me. I want to be more alive. Give me me. All the great fiction of the world satisfies this need. It tells me about me. That's what's good about Shakespeare, and it's also what's good about Homer. Shakespeare, except when you get hold of a book called The Doctored Works of Shakespeare or something of that sort, tells you absolutely nothing about himself. You can't learn anything about Shakespeare in Shakespeare. He himself is in dispute among scholars and critics to this very day because all he ever wrote about was you and me. Tell me about me. And when I read that, that was so profound, and it changed the way that I thought about things. Because it changed what I thought, but it made me realize what I thought. It made me realize that's true. That is the true desire of the reader. True readers read because we love to read, right? But why do we love to read? Why do we love great literature? We love characters, and we love plot, and we love language. We love words. But ultimately, what is that desire? What's one of the biggest complaints that we make about a book that we don't like? A lot of the time we say something like, I couldn't connect to it. It didn't feel real to me, or it didn't seem true, or whatever. We are searching for a better understanding of the world, but also of ourselves. Reading just for the sake of intellect, just for the sake of knowing things, is to completely miss the point. Stick to your textbooks if that's what you're looking for. There is so much to be learned in literature, but there's just so much more than that. When I'm reading a book, I don't want the author to sound high and mighty. I love it when they sound incredibly intelligent. but in a way that, again, treats you as an equal. And I think that the really, truly great writers are the people that he was talking about in those quotes, and the people that I think about as really great writers. I think on some level, they'd be disappointed in our modern generations in the way that we look back at them. Because so many times we talk so much about the author, we dwell so much on the author and what they were trying to say in their work. And I think the authors would look at us and say, we've missed the point of their work. It was a story, and we were supposed to read it and love it for what it was, and not just reduce it to a lesson in a college, you know? Just another purely academic thing. That's not what stories are. They are, they're living things in a sense. They are about people, and we read them to understand ourselves better. We read them to understand other people better. We read them to understand the world better. And that's why I love novels so much, because it helps you to live so many different people's lives. You can stay at home and experience the lives of all these different people in all these different settings. And yeah, I love the language. I love the words. I love older books partly because of that, because of the beauty of the language that is not really in our modern books anymore, for the most part. We've kind of developed a new literary sound in some of our modern literary books that is really beautiful, but it's not the same. But I don't read those books just for the sound of the language. You read it as a whole. I think Dickens is a good example, because if you think about some people, you could say, well, why was Dickens writing? You could say, like, well, the Pickwick Papers, or Oliver Twist, or what is the Nicholas Nickleby. These books, he was writing to expose things that were happening in the time, right? That's part of his writing. But we would be very wrong, and we would be missing the whole point if we looked at the Pickwick Papers and say, oh, that's the book that was exposing the horrible condition of the debtors' prisons of the time. And that's what that is. Or to look at Oliver Twist and be like, that was written exposing the slums of London of that time, and that's what that is. Or Nicholas Nickleby is exposing the boarding schools of the time, and that's what that is. He put those things into stories because within a story, we can absorb those things in a setting that is entertaining, is useful, helps us connect to people and to attach ourselves to characters. A book is never about a single thing, right? Yeah, there's just so much that you could talk about on why we read classics. Another reason would be classics help us to understand modern literature. I think it's important to read books like Don Quixote, because that's a really old book. It's kind of difficult to get through. The language is really old. But reading that, then you suddenly see and you suddenly understand its influences in modern literature, the references that people make to it all the time. But again, we don't read it just for that. We don't read a book just so that we can understand cultural references, right? Also, Don Quixote is a good example of people can read that and say, it's a comedic metaphor, basically. It's a kind of a parody novel. We can read that and be looking so hard for what it really means and for the metaphors that we miss just enjoying the story, because it's a very funny, very entertaining story. And so we can read it and get all intellectual about it and miss one of the biggest points, which was just to enjoy the fun of the story. It's never there's never one reason to enjoy a book. There are so many, but those are a few of the reasons. Basically, we want to read with our minds, but with our spirits also. We want to look at things from an intellectual standpoint, but I think from a basically read with your heart and your mind together, not separate. It just really frustrates me when people reduce books to something purely intellectual, something purely about ideas to argue over, about the place that these books have in literature and the great revolutionary things that these authors did, and the different forms that they were using, the different techniques that they used, how this person did a breakthrough in this area and this person did that. Those things are very interesting, and studying those things is very fun, but it's easy to get carried away and then only look at books in that way and miss the great beauty of the story and the great beauty of people. It's partly why I don't like Gulliver's Travels. Just a touch, a little more in one of the books that I talked about that I dislike. I never just dislike a book for no reason. I want to be clear about that. There are always reasons. Because I enjoy comedy and I enjoy satire. Somebody pointed out that it was a satire. I understand that. But I don't like it when that's all a book is. I enjoy comedy and I enjoy satire. I like a little bit of a bitter edge to comedy for sure, but not when that's all that it is, because it's like the author in that circumstance is reducing the book to being purely an intellectual experience. And that's, those books definitely have their place and they have worth, but not as a novel, to my mind, because again, I think books are so much more than mind only matters. So those are some thoughts. I know they're kind of rambly. It's such a huge topic that I could talk about for so much longer. And again, there's so many reasons to read, so many good reasons to read. There isn't really a bad reason to read. The only bad reason to read is if you only have one reason for reading, is what I would say. So those are some thoughts about why I read books, why I read classics, and kind of what my criteria is for a book, which is basically, it needs to be good. And it needs to be good on a lot of levels, not just one. So those are some thoughts. I don't know. I hope they're clear. Thanks for watching. I appreciate it. I will be back talking about all the books, all the classics that I love. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.